You guys, the 2020 experience is here, and I could not be more excited to share this with you. It is a culmination of the many years I have spent participating in high-level masterminds and the many years of leading masterminds. Quite frankly, it's what I desperately want myself, and I think is needed and is completely missing. I don't know anyone else doing this, and so I put it together just for you. It is for 32 ambitious women who are ready to make 2020 their year. It involves a larger mastermind of 32. It involves a smaller mastermind of 8. It involves accelerators to really dig deep and get momentum when you need it most. It involves one-on-one expert coaching and services. It involves 3 in-person meetings, 2 of which are at Miraval, which is a luxury retreat, which really, in and of itself, transforms every part of you because it allows you to tap into the wellness and the mindset and the peace that is needed in order to truly go after your dreams. This entire year is intended to help you go bigger than you've ever gone before, to really get outside of your comfort zone and to leave behind those old patterns, those old excuses that keep showing up over and over again, and they're holding you back and keeping you from having the life that you really want. So this program is not for the faint of heart. It is only for those who are 100% committed and ready to go all in, ready to leave their excuses at the door and to really show up in a way that they've never shown up before for themselves, for their families, for their careers, for a group of women that perhaps they've not experienced that before. A tribe of women who are really at that high level, supporting you, pushing you, and challenging you, and calling you on your stuff so that you can be the best version of yourself. It is going to be a year of intense hustle and intense flow, and it is going to change lives. And the ripple effect is going to go far beyond just this group of 32 women. But it is here. It is ready for you. If you're looking for a breakout year in 2020, you can apply at 2020mastermindexperience.com. Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode 144. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard. Thank you so much for joining me this week. If you have not yet left a rating or a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast app, whatever that is for you, please do so. It means so much. We try to bring free, valuable content to you every single week. And if you are feeling generous and would like to return the love, we would really appreciate a rating and review. All right, so today we are going to talk about reviewing, closing out the decade, and prepping for the next one. It seems big, right? It seems really monumental that we are about to embark on a brand new decade. And I have to say, when we were about to do that a decade ago, right, when we were doing 2009 going into 2010, I don't really recall thinking of it that way. I mean, maybe I did. Maybe there was buzz around it, but I don't remember that. Maybe we just all want a little bit more change now. I don't know, kind of like where we are in society, but it's a big deal. And, you know, if you're on Facebook, I'm recording this about a month out, but if you're on Facebook right now, the big thing is comparing your 2009 picture with your 2019 picture. And you really can see how much people age. I'm like, no thanks. I don't need to post that comparison. But it really does make you think, like, where has the time gone? Holy crap. And for me, I turned 40 on December 28th. So when I think about an entire decade, right, like that's 25% of my life. And it's kind of crazy when you think about it in those terms, but we're getting ready to prepare for a new decade. And there's no better time to get intentional, because I think part of what's so interesting about the comparisons of the pictures and then just talking about preparing for a new decade is a lot of times we look at what's happened and sometimes we have this sense of regret. I mean, I don't know about you, and it's kind of why I wanted to do this episode. I had something else planned, but I have been sensing it, and I don't know if it's where I'm getting ready to turn 40, but I kind of feel like I've been sensing it from others as well. It's really just this, where has the time gone? And almost this sense of sadness. I feel like I see more sadness than excitement right now. And so I thought, okay, we need to talk about this. Really, it's like just this sense of, maybe I didn't get done what I wanted to do, or, time is just flying, and it makes us think about how much time we have left, all of those big things. And so I thought, all right, this is really, really a good opportunity for us to look at what we did in the last decade, but to do it rather quickly, because I'm not one to dwell on things. Well, sometimes I am, and we'll talk about that, but it generally doesn't serve us to dwell on things. And, I'm a history major. So you would think that I would be stuck on the past and want to look at the past and analyze the past and figure out what we can learn from the past, all of that stuff. But I'm really more futuristic. I like to look to how we can change things. So I like to look at the past to make sure that we're not making the same mistakes over and over again. I think history fascinates me to see really how people are led and what they believe and what happens culturally, politically, all of those things. But as opposed to getting too focused on what happened or didn't happen or what could have been, like it just doesn't serve you unless there's something there that you need to heal or let go of. Otherwise, it's far better to just look forward. That said, we do want to look back to make sure that we don't keep repeating the same mistakes, right? We bring so much of our baggage with us. So the fact that it's a new year, the fact that it's a new decade does not mean you are just going to be a new person because, right, like there was that calendar flip. No. You are the same person. And the likelihood of you bringing your old stories and your old baggage and your, bad habits with you, like it's still going to be there. There's nothing magical that's going to happen that gives you this clean slate. It is not a clean slate, right? You can always start anew. You can always choose to start again, but just know that you are still the same person. And so it's worth looking at that so that you can be aware of it and get in front of it and know that those are things you're going to have to actively work on. That said, if you were familiar with the blueprint at all, the Life and Law Blueprint, which also is getting a new name, but if you don't have a copy of it, definitely go grab one. It is heatherjoyhubbard.com/blueprint. And it goes through my 7-step blueprint that I've been teaching since day one. And the third step is inventory or honesty about where you are. And part of that is how you got to where you are. So we want to look at that. What we don't want to happen is what Michael Hyatt calls drifting, which is, we're just so in the day-to-day. We are so busy that we just let the current take us wherever. And then sometimes we end up in places where we're like, how did we get here? And it's because we just weren't being intentional. So let's look at the past decade. Let's see what got us where we are. And if you notice that there was actually a lot of drifting in the last decade because you weren't being intentional, or you were going after the wrong things. And if you don't know what I'm talking about on that, I highly encourage you to go back and listen to episode 142, which was the opening keynote or the opening talk for my live event in Miami, where we talk about why we're going after goals to begin with and how many times we can just be chasing things thinking they're going to make us happy, but they actually lead us astray. So getting clear on why we have these goals to begin with and make sure we have the right goals, you might want to go listen to that. So let's walk through a process of reviewing the last decade so that we can be prepared for and set up to succeed and be intentional and not drift in the next decade. So the very first thing that I want you to do, and by the way, we do have a download with this episode that has the questions in case you want to print it out and actually write your answers in. So if you want that freebie, just go to hustleandflowpodcast.com/144. So the first question is really, what are your wins? What were your wins from the last decade? What do you want to celebrate the most from the last decade? And that can be hard to do. And by the way, I think that you should look at 2010 through the end of 2019 because that is truly 10 years. So January 1, 2010 until today, what are the wins that you want to celebrate? What were the highlights? For me, I mean, I'm a different person, right? So I said, you take things with you, but you can always change. I mean, I am a totally different person. 2010 is the year where, kind of everything fell apart for me. And if you've not heard that story, you can go all the way back to episode 1 when I share about the year that it all went wrong in so many ways. And it's what Brene Brown calls, the spiritual awakening / mental breakdown. That was definitely my year, was 2010. And it brought about so much change. I mean, there's a part of me that wishes, right, like that 2010 never happened because it was so painful and terrible. But when I then look at my wins, when I look at what all I am so grateful for and what I celebrate the most, none of those things would have happened had 2010 not happened. You guys, great news. The 2020 planners, project pad, and bookmarks are finally here. More than a typical planner, it is a complete planning system that will revolutionize the way you approach your days, weeks, months, and years. It will help you achieve your biggest goals and work on that to-do list so that you can take back your day and focus on what matters most. Get yours now at lifeandlawplanner.com. Right when we're in it, when it sucks, we can't see out of it. And we don't know why we would ever need to suffer that way. And that's why I want you to look at your wins. You may not have the same story, right? I hope you didn't have to suffer at all in the last decade. But my guess is if you're human, you did. Because even though we live in this beautiful Instagram world where everybody is putting their best face forward, especially if you're a professional, right? Like you always show up, with your best face. We tend to be guarded. We don't share personal stuff. But if you're a human at a certain point in your life, you are experiencing your own stuff. And my guess is you experienced some of that in the last decade. But what I want you to do first and foremost is actually look at those wins. And then you might be surprised if those wins and those celebrations would not have happened but for, right, some of the bad stuff. So for me, I have so many wins. I can't even possibly share them all. But when I think back at what brought me the most joy and what was just so exciting, I became a partner. I became a practice group leader at my firm. Like that happened within the last decade. And it was so meaningful and exciting for me. I worked on some amazing cases, huge cases that made a big difference. Cases that were a lot of fun. Got to meet a lot of celebrities along the way. The Nashville Business Journal, they named me 40 under 40. That was so much fun. That was so exciting. It was just an honor. I got to serve on the W.O. Smith School of Music board. And for a few years, back when they still did it, I got to lead their big art event. It was called the Birdhouse Thing. And that was so much fun. I got to meet a lot of great people and really help a great cause. That was so meaningful for me. I found 12-step groups and learned 12-step principles. I found mindfulness. I found meditation. And I am no longer the same person because of that. I mean, completely transformed who I am and allowed me to experience so much joy and peace and ease in a way that I had never experienced before. The drama that had filled my life for 30 years no longer felt like drama. I was no longer willing to buy into the dramatic stories. And that was life-changing. The biggest win, quite frankly, of my entire life, not just the last decade. I got reconnected to my spirituality and have just had a lot of fun. Again, just getting reconnected with, who I am and what I love, especially related to meditation and crystals and astrology and all of that fun woo stuff for me. I took some amazing vacations. The absolute highlight was going to Tanzania, also life-changing. And Banff was pretty amazing as well. Went to some other cool places along the way, but those were definitely highlights. Traveling is always a big win for me. Like, I just always enjoy that stuff so much. We went to Cabo for Thanksgiving. And this is a win. This is a win because faced my fears and found courage to do what I wanted as opposed to showing up the way other people needed me to and not worrying about what other people thought or people pleasing. So we ditched our family and went to Cabo one year. And we've kept up that tradition where we do what we want on Thanksgiving. And on Thanksgiving Day this year, which I guess right now I'm recording it and it's not yet Thanksgiving, but when it comes out, clearly it will have passed. We're headed to Morocco. So that's a huge win for me that I was able to stop the people pleasing and start following my heart and intuition and not worrying what other people thought about it and going on these amazing trips. I did some work around childhood and adult trauma. And that doesn't sound like a win, but it was so necessary and so needed. And then I started a business, right? I left a lucrative career and started a business. What a win. And then from there, holy cow, I just can't, the last 5 years have just been crazy. It's been a whirlwind. A podcast, an award-winning podcast with tons of you listening and downloading, and I'm so grateful. A planner, a real physical planner that we are selling, and a project pad and bookmarks, and we're already expanding that and leading masterminds and retreats at the most amazing places, having live events where people show up, right? It has just been incredible what all I have done. The people I have met along the way, I feel like my network used to be really big nationally, and now it's international. I truly have met the most amazing people doing the coolest things. There are a lot of wins. So I want you to do the same thing. I want you to think back to what were your big wins over the last decade. And when you tap back into that and you recall it, you should be able to feel it in your body because it brings you so much excitement and joy to think about what you did. It will also give you a clue as to the types of things you might actually want to focus on for the next decade, because so many times, right, we have goals and dreams and we get caught up in the day-to-day. And some of those things don't even make it on your list, right? When you do your decade in review, you're like, none of that actually came up. So pay attention to what you actually enjoyed. And by the way, just because something was a win, if, you did it because you thought you should have and you didn't really get a lot out of it, maybe don't count that. But a lot of times it was awesome. Even if you don't want it now, you wanted it then, and that's still a win. It's still a celebration. So check back in with everything that went well that you want to celebrate. And then the second question is, what were some disappointments? What were some regrets? What did not go well? And the reason why we want to look at this is, there's a few reasons, but we want to get clear on what we don't want to repeat, what we don't want to take with us, and what we do. Because like I shared, a lot of our wins actually come from our perceived losses. And the key is, what are you taking with you? And this is how the same event can happen to multiple people. And some people will stay stuck and let it completely take them out for the rest of their lives. whereas others take the lesson and they just move forward. And I get it's not easy to move forward. As I shared with you, I did a lot of intense work this year. I did a lot of intense trauma work. And, I don't want to get into too much of the specifics, but I also want for those of you who are feeling like things aren't going well, or you're just not happy, or you just can't get there, to know that you're not alone. I have experienced this myself. I don't always come on here and talk about this stuff, but I went through some really, really dark moments, including in the last 5 years running this business. But it was all very personal stuff where I was processing trauma that had nothing to do with what was going on in my current life, but really took me into deep, dark, depressive places. And you need help to process that stuff so that it doesn't continue to hold you back. So when I look at, my lows, and, my lows are very personal. And so I'm not going to really share those with you because, back to Brene Brown, it is great to be vulnerable, but I don't have to be vulnerable and share everything on the podcast, right? And you guys don't have to do that either. You only share that stuff with people you trust. You can do that with a therapist. I'm a huge fan of therapy. I've had plenty of therapy over the last decade, but that's something that you can just, kind of review on your own. What were some of your lows? I will tell you, this last decade for me had the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, really, really low. But the key to this, and what I want you to do with this particular question, is to look at those lows. And I want you to do number one, I want you to look at what was your part, what was your role in those lows, where you want to address it going forward in the next decade so that you don't continue to play that role. Because many of us repeat the same things over and over again, right? We don't really learn our lessons. Not because, we want to stay stuck in our bad patterns, but we don't really learn from them and let them go. We learn from them, but we think, oh, that won't happen again. And then it sneaks up and shows up again. And we're like, oh, okay, we're still working on this lesson. So I want you to look at that. What was your role? And then what are you still clinging on to? What are you still clinging on to related to that low? Right? How's it holding you back? Have you created a story that you now tell yourself or others all the time because of it? Are you still bitter? Are you still resentful? Are you still angry? What are you holding on to that isn't accomplishing anything? It's not helping you. It's not serving you. The only thing it's doing is holding you back and keeping you down, potentially keeping you depressed. I definitely have very strong beliefs and stories from some of my really low lows. And it's really, really important that we look at that and have awareness around the story we've created, because we do it, I think, to protect ourselves. We think, I'm not going to let this happen to me again, or I can't possibly go through those feelings again. So if I don't have any control over the situation or others, but I know it was pretty painful, then I'm just going to assume the worst. I'm going to assume that bad things happen all the time. Life is only going to get worse, right? So that I can pretend that it doesn't bother me when it happens, right? That's a defense mechanism. But you're not enjoying life because of it. So I really want you to get clear on looking at those losses, looking at the low points, what stories, habits, patterns, defenses you have come up with that is creating drama or disappointment or sadness in your life that you need to at least be aware of, even if you're not quite ready to let it go, so that it doesn't continue to show up and harm you or hold you back in the next decade. So Bronnie Ware, she's been in palliative care and helped many people at the end of their lives. And she just started to notice that they all had very similar stories as to what they regretted as they were facing their last days on earth. And so as we close out a decade, this is the perfect time to look at that. And definitely go check out her book. It's really, really good. It's called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. We'll put the link in the show notes. But regret number 1, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. So I wanted you to check in on the last decade of how you feel with that. Where could you have lived a life truer to yourself? And where are you living a life that others are expecting of you? Where moving forward, you don't want to do that as much, right? Number 2, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Okay, so I'm a workaholic and I'm like, I don't think I'll ever say that, but I get the concept, right? Because hustle without flow is a major problem. So I want you to check in on, are you working more than you should? Is it taking away from what you're really going to want when we start to do this review in the next decade? Number 3, I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. So check in on that. In the last decade, did you express your feelings? Were you open and honest with others? Or were you doing a lot of people pleasing and keeping things into yourself and pretending to show up as the strong one all the time? Number 4, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. So as you look back on the last decade, how much time did you spend with friends? And how much do you want to in the next decade? And what can you do about that to make sure it happens? And I think that one really is just about relationships, right? Doing all the things, achieving all the awards without relationships often isn't meaningful at the end of the day. And then 5, I wish I had let myself be happier. I wish I had let myself be happier, because it is a choice. We have a podcast episode on that. It was episode 111, choosing happiness. So if I say that comment of you can choose to be happy and you're like, what are you talking about? Go listen to that podcast episode. But look back on the last decade and just ask yourself, like, where was I creating so much drama in my head or in my life, or forcing myself to be, in situations that didn't bring me joy, as opposed to allowing myself to be happy? I just think it's such a great list. And indeed, if this is what people think about in their last days, we really should be thinking about it now so that we don't have those similar regrets. And then last, I want you to consider, what are the top 5 lessons that you want to remember? What are the top 5 lessons that you want to take with you as you go into the next decade? And obviously these are personal to me, but here are my top 5 lessons or mantras that I want to take with me that I want to remember. And the first one is, nothing is impossible. The second is, the most important person to please is yourself. And the third comes from our dear friend, Randy Flagg. I lost many great people over the last decade, and he was one. And he received a fortune cookie once that had this message in it. And it was, he works with my husband. He had this on his toolbox. And so when he passed away, my husband got it. So it's in our house. And the Chinese fortune cookie said, "Life is short, make fun of it." And so it's just to remember to have more fun. Life is short, make fun of it. The fourth is, there is always light at the end of the tunnel, and you are strong and brave enough to walk towards it. And then last, only love is real. So those are my top 5. But I encourage you to do this work so that you can close the chapter, but bring with you the lessons that you want to take with you so that the next decade can be even better. All right, that is it for today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the year. Enjoy the holidays. We have a bonus episode coming next week, and then I'll start helping you prep for 2020. So happy holidays, and I'll be back soon. For show notes, downloads, and other free resources, and to keep the conversation going, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com. See you there.